booktube. This is Aaron from Aaron Read a Book or Aaron Read a Book. I'm going to do my top 10 fiction books of the year. The most important video of the year for many people. That is why I am in a slightly different location. I've slightly angled across my room, and I'm also using the front camera, which I don't normally do because I don't like its high definition powers, but we'll give it a go for this video. It also means I can't see myself, and I really find that weird. I'm so used to just talking directly at my own stupid face that it's weird looking at sort of How from 2001. Anyway, let's crack on with the old books. I'm also probably going to put in a little bit of footage of some cats that I'm cat sitting Romy and Remy later. Anyway, so number 10. Number 10 was shocking for me because it's one of those books that was very popular, and there was a film made of it, and I think it was in the Richard and Judy book club, and Richard and Judy is like the English equivalent of the Oprah book club, but instead of being run by Oprah, it's run by two nincompoops. So you would not trust these people with any sort of recommendation, let alone literary. But I loved it, and I thought it was going to be sort of saccharine and overly sentimental, etc. But I mean, it was quite saccharine, but I like that. And that is the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Society. It's by Marianne Schaefer, and Annie Barrows is her niece who finished the book for her because she died. It's actually a sort of an amazing story about this book as well, in that she was an old lady who has always loved books, and her book club sort of encouraged her to write this book, and she'd never written a book before, but she died just as she was finishing it, and her niece finished it off, and it became a massive international bestseller. So it's a kind of sweet story, although it's sad that she didn't find out that it was. She knew she'd sold the book. Anyway, what's it about? So it's set in World War II. I'm sure many of you have read this. It's set in World War II, and it's about a writer who is contacted by someone living on the island of Guernsey. Guernsey and Jersey are the two Channel Islands just off the UK, and they were occupied during World War II by the Germans, and so someone from Jersey contacts this author in London because they've seen her name written in the inside cover of a book. I can't remember if her address is in there, but maybe like back in the old days, you can just put Harry, address London, and it would get to someone. But yeah, they start talking to each other via letter, and about the book club that they're running, which is kind of for other reasons than books, really. It's sort of a sneaky book club to have these meetings under the Nazis' eyes. Anyway, this post-World War II, she goes and visits the island, etc, etc. I won't go into too much details because it is very plot and character heavy book. But yeah, I absolutely loved it, and I'm a sucker for books about book clubs and books, so I really was not expecting to like it because it was such a big hit, and normally the general public are terrible judges of books, but I really loved it. So that's number 10 on my top 10 books. A nice surprise. Number 9, not so much of a surprise because it's one of my favourite authors, and I've just spoken about this author in my 3 authors that I'm always in the mood for, and that is Agatha Christie and her book The Crooked House. So this is got quite a similar plot setup to almost all Agatha Christie's, in that Um, it's an old man who has died mysteriously, and well, everyone knows how he's died. Actually, he's been injected by his sort of living nurse with, or sorry, not his living nurse, his wife, his new wife, with instead of insulin, eye drop medication, which has killed him. Um, and he is the owner of a big business, and or well, he's retired now. He's sort of passed the business on to his son, but they own a big house, big unusual looking house, and everyone who's in the house at the time is a suspect. Um, this is not Hercule Poirot. It is not Miss Marple. It's just a random character, a man who's the son of like the head of Scotland Yard, who happens to be dating a girl who's working in the house, or working in the house, who lives in the house, the daughter of the granddaughter, sorry, of the man who's died. Um, I just think this is a perfectly set up Agatha Christie, and Agatha Christie herself said this was one of her favourite books that she ever wrote, and she'd had this family in her head for years and years before she wrote it. Also, this is definitely the main influence for the film Knives Out. So if you like the film Knives Out, give it a go. It's definitely in my top 3 Agatha Christie's ever. I would put it up there with The Murder of Roger Ackroyd and Then There Were None. It doesn't have though. It doesn't have one of her famous twists in that she has a few twists that everyone's recreated. This is more straightforward, but it's just a really brilliantly done Christie, and you could tell she was having fun making it. Right, book 8 in my top 10 books of the year is a new author to me, and that is Willa Cather, and the book is My Antonia. Although when I did my review, I think I called her My Antonia the whole time. Hannah from Hannah's Books has been doing a brilliant series on Willa Cather, and she spoke with Sean the Book Maniac about this novel, and they corrected my pronunciation. So it's My Antonia, and I love this so much. It's so beautifully written, and I now want to go and read every Willa Cather novel, especially the rest of that trilogy that makes up. I can't remember what it's called actually now, but I know it's My Antonia and Oh Pioneers and another one. But yeah, this is a novel about a young boy, Jim Burden. Well, it's from Jim Burden's voice, and he is moving to live in Nebraska with some other part of his family. I think it's his grandparents, and he meets a little Bohemian girl. Well, a whole Bohemian family, but most importantly, a little Bohemian girl called my Antonia, called Antonia, on the train on the way there to Nebraska. And this is, I don't know exact year off the top of my head, but it's set in the early days of where it's still quite wild down there. And Antonia doesn't speak English really when he first meets her, and she learns from Jim and from Jim's family, and then she sort of takes charge of her family, even though she's a little girl. Her dad's a weak character and things, and it's Jim's sort of lifelong fascination with Antonia. This book spans almost their entire lives, or until their adulthood anyway, and he's obsessed by her. And I think this is quite biographical, because I think that at least Willa Cather did move out to Nebraska when she was a child, and there probably is this probably is based on a real person, and Willa Cather, I think, was a lesbian, but obviously in the book Jim Burden is a man, so his fascination is never realised in that they don't get married or anything, and I think that might be reflecting sort of what happened in real life. But it's a brilliant character focused book. Anthony is a brilliant character, and there's many other little brilliant characters in this, and there's parts of it that are almost like little short stories in the novel. And Willa Cather's, I think, a well-regarded short story writer, so it's just beautiful little vignettes of the town that they live in and things like that. It's wonderfully done. Highly recommend it. But yeah, so very happy to be introduced by Willa Cather to Willa Cather, and we'll definitely be reading more of her. So I would say, if you like character-driven literary fiction with excellent use of language, this is one for you. Not super plot heavy. Talking of plot heavy, although this has got great characters as well, my number 7 book is True Grit by Charles Portis, and this is another new author to me, although I don't think Charles Portis wrote a great deal that's still in publication anyway. This is a western that I read for June on the Range. I already knew the story of this book because I've seen this film, the Coen brothers film, but I've also seen the original film with John Wayne and things. This is just such a brilliant little novel. It's very short, and again, like My Antonia, there's just one incredibly great character. Just looking at the back to remember her name, Mattie. Mattie's father is killed. It sort of in a sort of cowardish way in a gunfight. He's shot unarmed, and Mattie is like 12 years old, I think, and she's like goes into town and asks who is like the meanest gun for hire that you can find, and she finds Rooster Cogburn, who's sort of a drunken buffoon but an incredible character as well. He's like sort of the washed up old drunk who's still great shot and great wits. But the dialogue in this book is absolutely fantastic. If you've seen the films, you'll know that the dialogue back and forth between Rooster and Matt is sensational, and it's like such a tight, brilliantly done little story. If you've never read a western, try this, just because on the page it is so good. Like, it's so good, just the dialogue and the characters. Highly recommend. I've no idea what else Charles Portis wrote, so I know I have seen other people reading some of his other books, so maybe one day I will read another one. Right, number 6 on my top 10. I keep saying books, but it's really fiction books. I'm not going to include non-fiction or do a non-fiction list because I think I only read about 12 non-fiction books this year, so although there were some great ones. Number 6 anyway is the first appearance of science fiction on this list, and that is Roadside Picnic by Arkady and Boris Strugatsky. I did quite a long review of this because I loved it. It's so Russian. If you like the Russian classics, definitely give this a go, even if you're not a sci-fi fan, because it has this incredible bleakness about it. The setting is it's a first contact novel, but it's like no other first contact novel in that aliens have visited, they've not found Earth very interesting or even interacted with Earth, and then they've passed on. So one character likens this to a roadside picnic. They've just come, left like pork pies and sausage rolls and bits of egg on the floor, packets, gone on like a roadside picnic. So they've left these zones on Earth that are full of weird things and weird physics. They've changed how the world works in these places, but they've also left devices and things that humans can't comprehend. They work out how to use some of them. Like there's like everlasting batteries and things that they work out their uses. But this is a novel where where humans can't comprehend what the aliens have created, and the land is dangerous, incredibly dangerous. Most people who visit, a lot of people who visit, and they don't know what they're doing, die if they go into these zones. So there are specialists who know how to sort of survive in the zone, and they are called stalkers, which is the name that Andrei Tarkovsky took when he adapted this to a film, Stalker, which is another bleak Russian masterpiece in another way. There's also an interesting story behind the authors in this edition, the Sci-Fi Masterworks edition. Boris has got an essay at the end, and he talks about how they couldn't get this published because the Soviets didn't like it. They were writing inside the Soviet Union. The Soviets didn't like it, but really, I find it is more of a criticism of capitalism, in that this industry builds up around these zones, and the stalkers are sort of criminals and not very pleasant people. They will do each other over for profit and things. So it's interesting. The protagonist is this one of the stalkers. It's a working class person doing a horrible job for, and in quite criminal way, because you're not meant to go into them really. So yeah, it's more criticism of how the Earth would actually react to this alien situation, an alien visitation, and the West basically makes it a commercial enterprise. This is set in the West, so they talk about the Russians who put a massive barrier around it and no one's allowed in it, but the West commercialise it, build up a military industrial complex around this visitation. So very interesting novel, bleak, but it makes you think. If you've ever seen the film as well, the ending of the film is different, but it has the same sort of spirit, in that as soon as you finish it, you're thinking about it for a long time. But yeah, they do have quite a lot more novels that I can read as well, so very, very enjoyable science fiction. Yeah, if enjoyable is the word. Next up, this is I'm not including rereads on this list, but this is kind of a reread because I had read it before, but I realised the version I read 20 years ago was actually an abridged version, so I'm counting this as a fresh read because I've never read every word of it. So, and that is very popular on BookTube, Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. I've been sort of slowly going through the Brontes over the years. So this was one of the first Brontes I read after Wuthering Heights, which I still kind of think is my favourite. But a couple of years ago, last year, I had The Tenant of Wildfell Hall was in my top 10. So I thought I need to revisit Jane Eyre. It seems to be a lot of people's favourites, and with good reason. Obviously, I love the Brontes strange atmospheres that they create. Um, their language is lovely, although I do think they're not the greatest um, introduction to Victorian literature, because I do think they're slightly more difficult to read than someone like Trollope. Um, and but 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 wonderful nonetheless. Yeah, I think everyone knows the story of Jane Eyre. But she has a very unhappy childhood. She she's growing up in like her aunts or uncles. No, it's her aunt, because I think her uncle's dead. Anyway, then she has a horrible school. Actually, so there is some nice parts of being at school. Then she's a governess in sort of a house with some questionable things going on in it. Um, what I really think is brilliant about this novel is the structure. It's sort of there's sort of five sections where Jane's life in this book, and they're perfectly sort of structured, so you're never bored. You're always the story's always quite fresh. Um, and it's weird, this Bronte family. Why were they so good at making novels? It's a very fascinating thing. I really want to read some non-fictions about the Brontes. So, but yeah, it was great sort of rereading it or reading it properly for the first time, and now I need to reread Wuthering Heights to see if it's still my favourite, or if this is my favourite, or is The Tenant of Waffle Hall my favourite? I don't know. Bronte is a very interesting family. Next up, we're staying in the Victorian era, and this wasn't a new author to me because I'd read her Gothic tales before, but I was not impressed by them. So I was not expecting to absolutely love her book North and South, which is Elizabeth Gaskell. And actually, if I was allowing an author to have multiple books on this list, which I'm not, for obvious reasons, when you get to my number one, this I would also have Cranford on this list. So this has been a year of Gaskell for me. North and South. Someone on Goodreads calls this the socialist Pride and Prejudice, which is a very funny and sort of apt description of the novel. It's a sort of romance. It's a strange romance because there's not actual any romance in the main body of the novel, but it's the story of a family that move to the north of England and in Victorian times, and sort of become involved in the then, or not come involved with, but they learn about the mills operating, cotton mills, and they learn about it through a working class family that the main character becomes friends with, and who work in the mills as a worker, and she makes friends with his daughter. But they also learn about it through the mill owner. So you get the this is a novel about class, really. There's her class, which is sort of the aristocracy, almost not the aristocracy, but the ladies and gentlemen, and then you get the mill owner, who is obviously a different type of class to the mill worker, but he is uncouth to the lady and gentleman sort of class. He is a northerner. He's self-made man, and then you get the actual working class. So also it's about the north and south of England, which is a divide that still exists, and in England, class is still a very important thing. Like, it's still a very spoken about thing. So this novel, especially if you're English, or live in the UK, it still feels very real. It is about prejudice and pride, and this girl is quite naive and doesn't, when she moves up north and doesn't know about the how hard people's lives are and things, and you learn with her, and it's beautifully done. There's a great adaptation on the BBC as well. I said this when I reviewed it on my channel, but there's a beautiful adaptation, and there's such wonderful scenes. They've got a real working Victorian mill in it, and you can see all the cotton coming down in the sky, and it's like snow. It's beautifully done. In the novel, obviously, one of the characters is dying because of all that cotton gets in their lungs, but that's the thing about this novel. It tells you about the working classes in Victorian times, and not many other people doing that. Dickens obviously was as well in his sort of characteristic way, but this is gritty and beautiful, and the last page of this novel is sensational, but best last page ever. Right, we're into the top 3. So my number 3 author, believe it or not, is not 200 years dead. It is someone who is alive and well, and also this is a very, very short 90-page novel, and this is a bit of a booktube darling. It's Foster by Claire Keegan. This is a very simple story in that it is about a young girl who's from a very working class family visiting for a summer or so her mother's sister's family. Trying to work out the family thing in my head. So she's visiting a family that's slightly more affluent. Her home life before she goes there is quite terrible. Her bit of a drunken father and an unhappy mother, and she goes to this rural place, and it's sort of, I don't know, I don't even want to go into too much detail because it's such a beautiful novel, but it's sort of about found family in a way, but she sort of, this little girl discovers what love is basically for the first time, or parental love, and it's just 90 pages long, incredibly sparse prose. Every single word and sentence is key in this book, and it's just, I was just flabbergasted. I'd never read Claire Keegan before. I was just flabbergasted at how pared down she had done something. She like, it's like when you're making a soup or something and you reduce it down to the stock. She's just reduced the novel down to this tiny, beautiful thing. And also, there's a brilliant film of this as well called The Quiet Girl, an Irish language film which I highly recommend. Like this book made me bawl, and I don't cry that often at books, but I was bawling. And then when I watched the film, I was like crying within 15 minutes because I was already thinking about how beautiful the ending was going to be. But again, I read her other novel, which its name is escaping me now, but it got nominated for the Booker. Small Things Like These. I read that as well, and I really loved Small Things Like These. But I really loved Foster, and I will reread it many times because it's only 90 pages. But yeah, that's the only real newish book on my list, but well worth your sort of hour of reading. Right, and number 2 on my top 10 fiction books of the year is a sort of white whale for me. I'd owned this copy for many years, and I'd been intimidated by it for many years. I actually think I started it once or twice and got sort of 10 pages in and gave up, which I think is what a lot of people do. And this is a novel that people either seem to love or hate. It's or maybe hate's the wrong word, but I everyone on my Goodreads is either 5 stars or 1 or 2 stars, and that is Middlemarch by George Eliot. So this is a big novel, big Victorian novel, and it's the story of a village, really, the village of Middlemarch, and you are from the perspective of the sort of God's view, in that you take little looks into every single house in the village, and you learn their stories. So it's a huge cast of characters, and you jump around a lot. So I can see why people might not like it or get into it, but I think once you're sort of 50 pages in, 100 pages in, for me it just is unbelievably beautifully done. George Eliot is as good at character as anyone I've ever read, especially in the Victorian era. Just a masterful writer, beautiful on the page as well. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to even go into plot details because there's so many little plots in it, but it's the writing is the star, the characterization is the star. If you're into character heavy novels, definitely give this a go. It's beautifully done, and I think it's a masterpiece. I think some people just find it boring, but I loved it. I absolutely loved it. Yeah, I don't really know what more to say to that. I'll definitely will reread this many times in my life, hopefully. Number 2, Middlemarch. I also don't know what to read next by George Eliot. So if you have suggestions about that, I would be very interested, because I think I've ordered some, but I can't remember what I've ordered. But yeah, anyway. My number one book of the year. I don't think it would be much of a surprise to anyone who's watched my channel this year. I've only started my channel 6 months ago, but I think I've talked about this book or this series of books many times, but I'm only going to pick one, and that is the first novel in a series of 5 novels, and that is The Light Years by Elizabeth Jane Howard. And this is a series of 5 novels called The Cazalet Chronicles, and really I'm putting the whole series as my number one, but we'll call The Light Years the number one. I gave 4 out of the 5 novels 5 stars, and I don't know why I gave one 4 stars, because they're all 5 stars. Like Middlemarch, this is an incredibly character-driven novel. So this follows a family called the Cazalets, who are timber merchants, and we pick up with them in between World War I and World War II. So you have the grandparents as the sort of top of the family, and the grandfather is like the driving force in their business. Although this is not really a novel about business at all. I don't like businessy novels, but he's the main sort of person driving the business. Then you have his three sons, who 2 of them were in World War One, but one of them was too young. And then you have their children. So when we first start out, we have 3 generations of Cazalets already, and this novel strength is in the 3rd generation, the children. She writes children incredibly well, but the way the novel works is they're sort of visiting the family home. So it normally each novel in the series does sort of 3 or 4 years, or 2 or 3 years. Some of them are some of them are quicker than others. My phone just ran out of storage. This is why I don't use the front camera. But yeah, the chapters of this novel are set around Christmas or family gettings together. I don't know. Get-togethers. No, that everything sounds weird to me now. But they're set around like Christmas and summer holidays and things at home place, which is the name of the big family home that the grandfather and the grandma live at. But then there's other chapters in between these get-togethers where you follow individual characters. And if you look at the beginning of the book, there's a huge family tree, and you think, oh, this is quite intimidating. There's tons of characters in this, but it's amazing how quickly you get to know every single character in this book. And it's only for like 400 pages long, but you literally feel part of the family by the end of this book. And then to read 5 books where you grow up with these characters and see 20 years of their life, it was deeply sad finishing these books. Yeah, so it's my main mission on BookTube to get as many people as humanly possible to read these books. So by the light years. Anyway, that's my top 10 books BookTube. If you've read any of these, let me know. If you've read any other books by these authors, let me know what your favourites are, especially the sort of new to me ones like George Eliot. I've not read anything else of, and Willa Cather. But yeah, I've got Wives and Daughters to come as well with Gaskell, so that's exciting. And I've still got quite a few Brontes left to do, so it could be a good 2024 as well. Anyway, that's my top 10. It was quite fun doing this. I did my top 10 of 2022 as well, a couple of videos back. And yeah, I'll do my top 2024 hopefully, unless I get hit by a bus or something. Have a good one, BookTube. I'm gonna now put in some little cats that I'm looking after. My next door, well, not next door neighbour, but people who live across the road from me, I'm looking after their cats for them. So I'll just put a nice little bit of cat footage to finish off. Have a good one, BookTube. Remy. This is Remy. He's the friendly one. Hello. Hello. Smell my finger. And this is Rummy. Rummy's shy. He normally hides when I come round, but not today.